I'm
And all right, so I just, for the sake of time, folks, I'm just going to thank everyone for being here and introduce Dr. Erin Smith, who is the Fletcher Jones Endowed Professor of Research and also a Professor of Psychology at CalBaptist University, and has been working extremely closely with with this project. We started. Erin was just gracious enough to join us as a consultant to begin with for the Lilly grant, and then as we discovered that we actually could do a formal research project through our General Assembly, she's been good enough to stay with us and provide most of the guidance, along with Dr. Ross Oakes Mueller, who's at Point Loma Nazarene University. What I'll ask is just each and every one of you just to give greetings. That way we get a voice check, and then if there's any questions, you can always cut in. So, Christy, if you'll lead us, and then just everybody introduce themselves, okay?
Hi, my name is Christy Dix. I pastor in Pittsburgh, California, alongside my husband. We co-pastor together, and I'm serving as our NorCal representative for here. So, thank you.
Okay.
I can go next. I'm Deborah. I work at NTS in the Praxis department, which is our lifelong learning department, and I am also an associate pastor in Kansas City at St. Paul's Church of the Nazarene.
Danae?
Hi, I'm Danae, and I'm a student at NTS. I work in the library at NTS as well, and I feel called to work with children.
That's awesome.
And
I'm Stephen Porter. I'm the computer officer at NTS, and try to keep Dean straight as much as I can, and also a former children's pastor. So,
awesome. And Stephen was also has a doctorate of ministry through Nazarene Theological Seminary and has had extensive experience with children, so he'll be helping with the research as well. Erin, the only other person is Stephanie Hendrickson, and she should be hopefully joining us as we go forward. She's in Indianapolis area, Muncie, and will be coming in to help with the survey.
Okay, awesome. Well, I just got to say the brain power in this space, and what I mean by that is the collective experience that you all bring to this project on the practical and applied side is pretty incredible. And I'm really happy to meet all of you, even if just virtually. And really, I'm just really honored that you all would want to be involved in this project in this capacity. Because of course you need things like design and IRB, but you also need kind, smiling faces who are kind of fluent in speaking the language of families in order to actually collect the data. And so I'm really grateful for all of you. I know I was introduced as Dr. Erin Smith, and that's true. That is a title, but please just call me Erin. Let's just kind of like get that off the plate. I don't know what some of the formalities are in NTS, and so I don't know what cultural norms I'm stepping into. But please do call me Erin. I consider us kind of colleagues collaborating together. We all have our different spaces and different roles, and at a certain level, titles just don't matter. So there we go. You all have in front of you a document that I put together with Ross to just try to piece by piece articulate what a researcher wearing a research hat would care about in terms of the process of data collection. And so some of this, it might be like really in the weeds, but that's because there is a reason it matters. And there might be some questions that come along that maybe you have that we didn't preemptively answer. And so I just wanted to give an opportunity to kind of talk through this so that we've had a conversation together. We can be on the same page, but also give you an opportunity to ask questions, to provide feedback about the context in which this data collection is happening that I might not know about. I also just realized my mic has been like off in the corner, so maybe you can hear me better now. I don't know if that matters. There we go. Like I said,
That's helping. That's great. Thanks.
Yeah, you guys are like hearing me off in the muted distance because it's underneath all these papers and stuff. Anyways, luckily I said nothing important. So there we go. Let's get started with things that are important. In terms of this project, I think that Dean has already shared a little bit, but I just copied in this document really how I presented this project to our IRB, which is the ethics board that has given us the green light to collect the data in a certain way. So you all have completed your city training, so you have a sense of what an IRB board is. At least at kind of the 10,000 foot level. And so one of the things that has happened as we've achieved IRB approval is that we have committed to them, this is how we are going to collect this data. And there's often a little bit of wiggle room in how it actually plays out. But what I want to present to you are the boundaries around what we've said we're going to do in order to kind of probe this question of how does integration of children into worship impact the life of children, the life of their parents, and the life of the church more generally. In many ways, this is a precursor to the bigger project that is coming up the pipeline. So we'll be able to draw from the answers that are supplied in this in order to inform next steps over kind of in the coming 5 years. So let's start. If you are following, if you have the document open in front of you, would it be helpful if I shared my screen and talked us through it that way? Would you guys prefer that or having it open in front of you? You guys are like, I don't care. You make that choice. Okay, so I like seeing your faces. So if it's okay, I'm going to kind of keep it where you guys are big on my screen, and I'll just make sure I tell you where I am on the document so you can follow along. So I'm now on Roman numeral 3, process. It is my assumption, and this is where actually you guys can correct me if my assumption is wrong, that there will be like a standard kind of 6-foot table as a booth set up in an area where there might be other tables that people are going to walk through, walk past, or walk to. That there might be like a walkway, there might be an open space in front of you, but people will be navigating to different booths for different reasons. And so a flyer has gone out or will go out with the bags that the kids receive on check-in that says, hey, there's this study, come on by the NTS booth. And so folks are going to be coming up to the booth. We have permission to invite adults over 18 or adults with their children to participate. So if you see a child walking by themselves, you can be kind and you can be gracious, but you can't invite them to participate. They need to have a guardian with them. An appropriate guardian would first be a parent or kind of parent guardian in that case, but it could also be a grandparent. When we start getting into the realms of aunts and uncles, we're getting into slightly trickier territory. And so I would ask some follow-up questions, like if it's, and even if it's like grandma and grandchild, if the parents are there, you should encourage them to come back with their parents. But if it's like, no, mom and dad aren't actually here, I am here with this child as their guardian in this function, well, then grandma can be the signatory. But if there is a parent meandering somewhere at this assembly, they need to be present when they give assent for the child to participate. What I've given you under point B, the recruitment pitch, this is not a script that you have to memorize, but it is a template from which you can kind of fill in words that belong to you that mirror the idea of what we're saying here. So, hi, my name is Erin. I'm working with researchers. This is where there's like a lot of information. And so you might not want to be like, I'm working with researchers at Nazarene Theological Seminary, Point Loma Nazarene University, and California. That's a lot. So you can say, hi, my name is Erin. I'm working on a research project. to look at kids and adult experiences in church. It takes about 10 minutes. Would you like to know some more information? Are you interested in participating? Right. So you can start very kind of brief and to the point. And then from there, they might ask you some follow-up questions. If it's still within the context of what this recruitment script shows, you can just answer those questions. Otherwise, I would invite them to engage in the informed consent. I'm actually going to come back to points 1 and 2 in just a moment. So let's talk a little bit about the informed consent. So someone approaches the booth, you give them this pitch, you invite them to participate, and they say, sure, I have 10 minutes. I'll answer this question. They see the books on the table that they'll get if they participate, and you can tell them that, if you still have books, if you participate in the survey, I'd love to give you this copy of Praying with Jesus, one per family, whatever. If they express interest in knowing more, then you're going to hand them a clipboard with a survey and an informed consent on top. So the surveys and the informed consents will be stapled together. And so they'll start with the informed consent. You can ask them like, hey, have a seat over here if there's chairs, or like step aside to this location, take a look at what this survey is about, and ask me if you have any questions. But you will want to give them guidance about where to stand or to sit when they're doing this. Otherwise, you're going to have a huge cluster right in front. Well, I hope you would have a lot of people who want to form a huge cluster, but otherwise you could get a traffic jam that actually makes it really hard to control the space. And so depending on the particular setup of the booth and the physical space that you have, what you guys should do as a team is kind of come up with where are we going to ask them to be? So that way they're not crowding each other, but also so that way you're not blocking the pathway or blocking access to the booth itself. Hand them the clipboard so they can read through the informed consent. I will make sure that you guys see the informed consent before you actually go. Otherwise, when you get there, you should be able to read it and understand it. And it is there to answer questions about the study. So some of the things are things that IRBs care about, right? Like, are there risks? If you feel really bad after this, who should you talk to? How long is this going to take? What are you going to get as a result? Why should I do this? So all of those kinds of questions are addressed in the informed consent. If they get to the bottom of it, and the way that the informed consent is organized is that their signature will be either on the bottom or on the backside, but there's an arrow that directs them to page 2, which is where the child's information is provided. So you've given them this informed consent. You say, hey, this tells you about this survey. And actually, we would love it if your child participates too. So on the back side of this, you'll get some information about the kinds of questions we'd like to ask your children, but we'll only ask them if it's okay with you. Right. So it's possible to have a parent who says, yeah, I'll do your survey, but I don't want you talking to my kids. I think it's a little unlikely, but it's possible. And that's okay. And so once they get to the end, and really the child assent tells them the same information, because the child survey is functionally equivalent to the adult survey. The questions are worded at a level that's appropriate for down to a 6-year-old, whereas the adult survey is written for adults. But they're asking very similar kinds of questions about their experiences at church, their friendships, their experiences with God, and then the kinds of things that they do, reading the Bible, singing songs, these kinds of religious practices. Once they sign the informed consent, they already have the survey, they can just get started. At that point, if they don't want to participate, they'll probably hand the clipboard back to you and just say, no, thanks, I don't really want to do this. Or if sounds great, I don't have time, or whatever the case is. At which point you take it back, you smile and say, great, thank you so much for stopping by. Right? If you change your mind, if you have a little bit more time, if you have some questions that I could answer, please feel free to come back and I'd be happy to do that. But we want to be very careful not to even subtly hint at coercion, right? Like, I'll like you more if you do this, right? We don't want any of that kind of conversation, even implicitly. And I realize, especially in kind of this very relational, congregational kind of setting, it can be very easy to feel like, well, all of us are doing this. Why won't you do it too? Right. So we want to make sure that we kind of stay away from that kind of communication. On the table, this is just kind of a side note. So under informed consent 2, then kind of the sub bullet 1, there should be a couple of loose copies of the informed consent, because after they sign it, they leave it attached to the survey. That's our copy of the informed consent, but they might want a copy as well. And so there should be a few loose copies that you can tell them, hey, you can take this copy if you want to keep it, or you can scan this QR code and download it directly to your phone. I would really encourage people to scan the QR code, just because then you don't have to worry about so many copies of things, and it's easier. People have access to it then. But then they say, oh, now I have this document of what this study is about, and I also have the researcher's contact information. If I have questions or want to share thoughts, sometimes after a survey like this, people just want to email and say like, I hated your questions, or I loved your questions. It was so interesting. Have you thought about? And so that way people can have the freedom to reach out to any one of us on the research team to have that conversation. Okay, so under informed consent, they've read through the informed consent, they've signed it. Before they leave, you can remind them, hey, if you want a copy of that informed consent for the researcher's contact information, scan. As you're kind of watching them, and this will really just depend on kind of who approaches, but if it's like a whole family unit, you're going to want to tell them, hey, I actually need you to, if you want to do this, I'm going to need to know that I can ask your child to do it as well. And then once you see that they've given permission for the child to participate, then you can turn and intentionally invite the child. You're allowed to talk to the child while the parent is reading it. You're just not talking to them about the research study. Right? You're just like, hey, are you having fun? What are you doing? Do you like Indianapolis? Like, you can ask those kinds of questions. Once the parent has explicitly given permission by signing that informed consent and saying, yes, you can talk to my child. And if you're not sure, ask the parent, right? That's a good rule of thumb. Then you'll grab a clipboard with the child survey on it. So anybody who is 17 or younger will receive the child survey. And so that means that somebody who you could have a 17-year-old and they're going to be completing the same questions as a 6-year-old. And so one of the things that you should do as you kind of read who is in front of you is adjust how you talk about the survey accordingly. So if it's a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old and they're still willing to do it, you can tell them, hey, this survey was written so that any child, down to a 6-year-old would be able to participate. And so we know that we could ask these questions in a more complicated way, but I think that you'll still be able to answer them or something like that. You want to kind of acknowledge that the questions might feel like they're really written low, but that's because they are. And I think it's still fine. They're still appropriate, but maybe acknowledging that ahead of time, especially for some of the too cool older kids, might go a long way. When it comes to the younger kids, you can ask them, would you like me to read this with you? Right? I'd like to invite you to answer some questions about your church. But I need to know that it's okay for me to do that. Would you like me to read this with you, or do you want to read it on your own as you decide? And that's talking about the assent form. So whereas parents give what we call consent, children just kind of more passively agree. And so here they're going to check yes or check no. And there's a thumbs up and a thumbs down that goes with it. If they agree to participate, then you essentially will ask that same question. Hey, take a step over here where you can answer these questions. Would you like me to read the questions with you, or do you want to read them on your own? So the questions that we're giving kids, I've used in previous research before with kids as low as 6, as young as 6. We've done it in a church context, in a group setting. And so there are some kids that are fine reading on their own, and there are some that might still want a little bit of support in answering these questions. And so the support that you can give to children is reading the questions and identifying what the answers are without suggesting an answer to them. And so when you ask the question and you give them the response options, they might say, oh, well, that's most days or something. And then you say, oh, then you circled this one. And so you can help them know what do you do, but they have to be the one that generates their own answer. Speaking kind of boots on the ground, if you are in a position where a child is just not understanding things, you have kind of I was going to say freedom, but really the word I want to say is, what is it when you bring your own knowledge and like you can make an executive decision? That's the phrase I'm looking for. You can make an executive decision and say, whatever data this kid gives us isn't going to be meaningful because there's some mismatch between how the questions are being asked and the way this child is thinking about the questions. And so in that case, you can kind of ask them, would you like to stop or do you want to keep going? And if they say, oh, I'd like to stop, I'm done with this, then say, oh, okay, that's great. And you can take the survey from them and they don't have to finish it. I think that most kids are going to be fine, but you might come across a handful where that's not the case, in which case you can give them an out. And then if they choose to take it, great. And if they don't, great, right? And then you just kind of continue helping them through the remainder of that survey. Okay, so you've had a family approach your booth. The parent or parents have signed the informed consent. They've given permission for the children. So you've now invited the children. They've completed the assent and everyone's taking the survey. As they finish, they're just going to hand the clipboards back to you. And this is where, depending on how many people are in front of the booth, it'll be really important that we stay organized. Okay, let's see where I am. I'm now on point E, collect and combine surveys. I've skipped one thing that again, I'll circle back to, but for now, let's keep moving. So it would be if there's multiple families in front of the booth, if there are multiple of you, it would be great to designate like, I'm watching this family, right? Not watching them in this kind of like creepy, beady-eyed way, but watching them in the sense of when they finish, you are going to receive their surveys to help keep them organized. And so as they finish the surveys, you'll take them off the clipboard and then you'll clip the entire family's surveys together. You'll leave the informed consents, all of the surveys together. And if they're small enough, you'll staple them. If they're too big for a stapler, you'll take a jaw clip and clip them all together. We will eventually separate them, but at this point, just for the sake of expediency, you'll take them, you'll combine them in some way that is hard to separate and put them in a bin underneath the table for completed surveys. It's important that the bin with completed surveys stays kind of behind the table where people are not passing, especially because they're going to have names on them at that point. And so we want to make sure, not that I'm worried about some group of rogue Nazarenes coming in and stealing our data, but we really need to make sure that we've done what we can to protect the privacy and the confidentiality of these surveys. And so it needs to really be kind of both out of sight, but also protected where somebody couldn't just kind of meander in looking through them. And so that will happen at the point of combining. I have a note here in the case of a family with lots of members, we're going to be combining at the level of nuclear family. So if we have mom, dad, and kids, and then we have aunt and uncle, and then we have grandparent, right? We can put the grandparent with mom and dad and kids, but aunt and uncle are going to be over here by themselves. Because grandma and aunt and uncle are still connected, if you know these relationships, like if it's come out in the context of conversation, you can label them and put them all together, but you're going to want to pick one, like this is mom, dad, and these are their kids. And so relative to the kids, this is aunt and uncle, right? Kind of when in doubt, write information down on the back of the survey, and then we can always sort it out later. Right, that's kind of a good rule of thumb, is just make notes. And because of how the surveys are being collected, you'll want to make the notes directly on the surveys. Ross was really good in pointing out that when you make a note, it's best to wait until the participants have left, especially if it's a note of concern, right? Like this person was really distracted, or like mom answered all the questions for their kids. You don't want to write that right in front of them. You want to wait until they leave, you thank them for their time, you give them their book. Once they've left, you flip it over and you say, this child did not answer their own questions. And you write that as a note on the back so that we can account for that accordingly. Okay. I want to revisit one thing that I've skipped. So our questions for kids, most kids, especially those with formal school experiences, and I realize like some homeschool kids, they might have experience with this, but they might not. That's one of the benefits of homeschooling. You can do the curriculum how you want. They'll be familiar with this idea of circling the answer that applies to you, but not all kids are going to be as familiar with that. And so there will be an example question, probably a couple copies of this on the table. If a child says, yes, I'd like to answer these questions, and then you kind of hover for a minute and you're finding out, like, are you good on your own? Would you like my help? If it comes out that they aren't clear what to do with the questions, we've developed a couple of example questions just to teach them the format. So it's a question like, and actually you can, if you scroll down a little bit, there's a hyperlink to the document. It's written in the same format as the survey, right? So the instructions are in this bubble, the questions on the left and the response options go to the right. And so you can just ask them, okay, so this question is, what's your favorite kind of ice cream? And then they might holler out an answer and you say, okay, well, the options are chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, something else, or I don't like ice cream. And then they'll answer your question. You say, oh, so if that was your answer, you would circle this one. Right? Oh, you like pistachio? That's interesting for a 6-year-old. Let's circle, that's something else, right? And then you say, okay, so then the next question, when I have dessert, I eat ice cream. Is that true of you? And then you can talk them through these response options. Is that never true? Is that sometimes true? Is it true most of the time? Or is it true always? Right. And so now you're trying to link the way that they're answering the questions in their head to what does that mean for what they would do on the survey. And then the third one is I eat dessert, right? You can tell what state of mind I was in when I wrote these questions. All right, never, some days. And so these are actually the kinds of response options that are on the survey itself. And so there's a direct correspondence, with the exception of chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, right? But where they're going to answer questions that are with responses like never, sometimes, most of the time, or always. And so hopefully walking them through this will create kind of a, oh, I understand what I'm supposed to do with that. And then of course you'll still be around. If you feel like they look like they're stuck, you can step in and say, can I help you understand this question? Right. And then they'll answer yes or no. They'll do what they want to do at that point. Okay, I've been talking for a really long time. I have more to say, but let me pause at this point. Any questions? Anything that as you're thinking about what this event is going to be like, any concerns that I should address at this point in terms of the how-to of process?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Just for clarifying for the first one. So an adult who like doesn't have any children, like myself, I'm 23, I don't have any kids.
Yep.
Something like that. Can they still fill out the survey?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. So anybody who walks up can be invited to participate unless they're a kid without a parent. Then they need to have a parent to speak. But you can speak on your own behalf, and we care about your response, right? Kind of the you out there who would be taking this survey. Yeah.
Okay. My second question is, you mentioned like if there's an instance where we don't get a complete survey, like because they don't understand or something like that. What do we do with incomplete surveys?
So we still keep them.
Okay.
Unless they say like, this survey is terrible, please rip up my response, right? Then you rip it up and you put it in a pocket so you can dispose of it securely, or you say, here, I'll give you the informed consent back and then I'll rip up these responses, but then I won't be able to connect your name. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but if that happens, you just do what they want to feel secure about separating their name from their data. If they complete half the survey and then their baby just freaks out and they have a panic attack and they need to leave and it has nothing to do with you or the survey, and they say, look, I'm sorry, I can't finish this. You just take it, thank them for their time, and offer them the book.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Dean and I have even talked about, again, I don't foresee this as like a realistic possibility, but as soon as you don't foresee something as a possibility, it's bound to happen. let's say somebody comes up and says, I absolutely will not participate in your survey, but you better give me one of those books. Right? I don't know who that person is, but if they say that, just give them the book and send them away. That's fine. Like, you don't need to fight about that.
Yeah, this is not one to pick a battle over from
Yeah.
that standpoint. So
Yeah, that person needs a book called Praying with Jesus, if that's how they speak to you and that's how they approach. So in that case, you just say, like, here, can I give you a Bible too? In that context, if somebody earnestly engages the informed consent and they get to the bottom and they say, you know, I like what you're doing, I'm just not comfortable answering these questions, so I'm not going to sign the informed consent, I don't want to participate. You actually have, again, that kind of judgment that you can use, and you might want to still offer them a book because they sincerely approached and engaged and just decided not to. And that's a choice that they're allowed to make. And we have a few extra books, and so we were able to bump it from 350 to 400. And so you can say, thank you so much for reading the informed consent. I'd still be happy to offer you a copy of the book if you would like it. And there's a good chance that they'd say no because they didn't participate, but they also might be like, well, that makes me feel pretty good that you would offer that to me. And so that's also appropriate. Any other questions at this point?
I have a question. I'm not sure of where to fit this, but maybe like when writing notes on the back, do we write things like, I know there'll be like people speak lots of different languages. So would there be a place to write that there might have been like maybe like language confusion between like just any number of ways that could happen? Would we make note of that on the back?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. So let's actually jump ahead. If you look on important considerations under point C, take notes of potential concerns. So this could be something like, you weren't sure that they actually understood the questions, or the child was really, really distracted, or the mom was looking over the shoulder, maybe not the mom, the dad was looking over the shoulder and being like, you pray a lot more than that, or, whatever the case is, something that makes you suspicious about the integrity of the data. After they've left, you'll make a note on the front to let us know, hey, there's a note on the back, right? But you don't want to write it on the front because then you don't want to clutter up the kind of where the data actually is. So you might draw a big arrow or make a big star, and then on the back, you'll write that concern. And something having to do with language would absolutely be a potential concern. And so on the back end, when we're putting the data in, having those notes will allow us to separate the data where we can say, okay, let's put this data enough from all the other data that we might not want to trust it. And there might be some, and if you feel really strongly that this data should be thrown out, write that down, right? So you can make note of the concern. And then if you have kind of a snap judgment of, they were just randomly circling things, like, we really want to know that ahead of time. Generally speaking, so the survey is only in English. It is meant for English primary speakers. The book that we're giving them is also in English. And so if that is a barrier on the front end, you actually might want to ask them, right? So when you're talking about the survey, say, the survey is in English, you're welcome to try. And then if you feel like you can't understand it, then you can stop at any point. But the survey is in English. So I would lead with that especially if they approach speaking a different language. They greet you in English, you're just going to engage the way you would normally. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of, so now I'm going to scroll back up to the booth setup. There are 2 surveys. So you have the adult survey with the informed consent. This is for anybody who is age 18 and older. So if you have parents and they have 2 kids, one who is 18 and one who is 17, the 18-year-old technically is not part of that family unit. Now, you can submit them all together, but the 18-year-old will give it their own informed consent. If they complete it, they could get their own book. because they are their own unit from the perspective of how we're drawing these age boundaries. And so just ask questions if you're not sure, right? You guys are very kind, gracious people with pastoral experience. And so you know how to ask people these kinds of questions. I have things I could learn from you guys in that area. Then you have the child survey and assent. And that will be after a parent has agreed, then you can turn around and invite the child. And they only do the survey if they also want to do the survey. If there's several children, you can give it to them all at the same time, right? And say, this tells you a little bit about the survey. If you want to do it or not, we'd certainly like it if you did, but it's your choice. You can do it or not do it, and that's okay. And then kind of let them go on their own as they complete this. Those would probably be stored. The majority of the copies will be in a bucket underneath the table. And then on the table, you'll have some clipboards with one survey attached and ready to go. And then once it gets returned, then you'll refill it. So rather than having these giant stacks of undone surveys, those would all be underneath, and you just have the ones that are ready to hand out on the booth. Also on the table, you'll have a copy of that QR code that people can scan to save a copy of the informed consent. You'll have a few staplers and some jaw clips for combining the surveys together after you've received them. And then I would put a few books out on the table, the Praying with Jesus books. One, because then it's easy to hand them over when, right, to trade. You give me your survey, I give you this book, thank you so much. But also because a lot of people really like books. And so if you have them out on the table, that might bring some folks over just to look at the book and you say, oh, I'd love to give that to you. Would you like to do our survey? Right. And that kind of approach. And then of course, you'll have the example question. I would also have a couple copies of that example question so that if multiple children are, talking about this example question, you can keep the timeline moving. In terms of organization, really the biggest piece is combining the surveys on the end. And I realize I've now talked about this an inordinate amount of time, but it's because it ends up being one of the most important things in terms of us looking at the data afterward, that we know which children go with which adults when there are both children and adults together. There's value to the adult data on its own, with or without the children, and there is value to the child data on its own. But the real power of some of the questions that we want to ask is being able to look at the pairs of children and adults. So we really want to stay organized in order to facilitate that. I've already talked about concerns. I've talked about avoiding coercion. It's an invitation. They can say yes, they can say no, and that doesn't matter for our relationship. And then lastly, I'll just make a comment on effective recruitment. That effective recruitment are things that you probably already do naturally as the people you are. The people who Dean has told me you are, right? Smile, be kind, be inviting. People don't want to walk up to a booth if everybody looks like they're bored out of their mind or they're stressed beyond belief. And so if that is the case, like go take a walk and come back. You'll be more effective once you have had maybe a cup of coffee or something like that. And then also make sure that when you tell them about the survey, you tell them about the why. Right? What is it about this project that even excites you? Right? So we want to know, how can we best help children develop their love of Christ? Right? We want to know, how can we form adults in the context of a church congregation? And this survey isn't going to answer all of those questions, but it's going to be a really important part of how we can start to answer that question, so we can equip our churches to do what they're already trying to do a little bit more effectively, right? To help children and to help adults experience the love of Christ. And so really leading with that, a lot of people are willing to give 10 minutes for something like that, right? If they can get on board with the why would this matter, then even if they might be kind of in a hurry to the next thing, they might say, okay, I'll give you these 10 minutes. If they tell you, I just don't have the time right now, you're welcome, just invite them back. Unless they say, no, I absolutely do not want to do this, don't talk to me ever again, you are welcome to say, well, that's great, we're going to be here for the next couple of days. If you happen to come on by, we'd love for you to complete the survey and get a book. Right. And then the last thing, you want to make sure they haven't already participated. And that's going to be something that kind of each of you, as you talk to them, and you invite them to participate. Most people, if they've already participated, they'll say, oh no, I was just coming by to say hi or something like that. But you can, if just say, you know, we're inviting people to participate in a survey. Have you been by the booth before? And if they say no, then launch on your spiel. But if they're showing up with a book of Praying with Jesus, there's a good chance that they've already been at the booth and they can't participate again because we have no other way of tracking that. So that is the end of my overly detailed document that hopefully is helpful. But I do want to pause at this point and ask if there's any questions or things that I missed that you might like a little more discussion on.
I did have a question, and I apologize if you went over that. If you have a parent that has 3 children that would qualify to do this, that child is sent, can she or he do that for all 3 on that one form, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And actually, I have it where I can easily share it with you. So let me copy. Just have to find the right document.
Are you trying to show the document itself, the survey, or?
No, I was giving the link here. If you guys click that link, it should take you to the informed consent document. And so the whole first page is all for the adults, right? Telling them about their survey, how their data is going to be protected, compensation, etc. Gives our contact information near the bottom. They write their name and they sign, but then it tells them, please see the next page for information about the children's survey. And so if you go to page 2, it's essentially a paragraph describing the exact same thing, but for the kids, telling them kids as young as 6. And then they'll say like, I agree. And if they agree, then hopefully they'll also fill out the information. And we've given them space for up to 6 kids. But then there's a little more empty space if they need more than that. Yeah, it's a good question.
Anyone else? Any other questions for Erin?
Yeah, this is one of these things that it's not overly complicated, but you kind of have to cover all the bases, because when you step out there, you never quite know what to expect. And so hopefully this has given some good boundaries, and also maybe provided some information to answer some questions. If someone asks you a question that you don't know, just say, I'm not sure. And then text Dean, right? And get Dean back to the booth, because as a researcher, he can either answer the question or text me or something like that, right? But it's I don't anticipate a lot of I don't anticipate anything exceptional or unusual that you guys wouldn't be equipped to answer, either by saying, well, I either don't know the answer, you can send an email, or maybe you don't want to participate, and that's okay.
I can always make something up if it comes to that. So be sure to let me know. And one thing I can do, Erin, if you don't mind giving me just a couple of brief minutes, is I can share my screen and kind of give everybody a feel for the flow of what's going to be happening. Would that be okay for everyone? Okay, give me just 1 second. And so let's see. Stephen knows I'm testing out the capabilities of my brand new Zoom from that standpoint as well. So what you see here is actually the basic layout of the General Assembly exhibit halls. Some of you, if you've never been to Indianapolis, this won't mean a lot. Those of you who've been there before will be pretty familiar. But the main thing, if you've ever been downtown Indianapolis, there's a number of hotels, and there's a main frontage along Maryland Street. Then there's a big shopping center across the way. There's a parking lot. And down on this end is normally where Union Station is and the railroad. Most of you remember a lot of times all the big activities happened in Hall A, B, and C, and D. And a lot of people would go along this hallway, but the assembly has changed this time, and all the main entrance will be coming off of Capitol Avenue. And that means that you'll be coming in through this center section and down into Hall F and G, E, and C. And so we're on this end of the convention center this time around. And so I'm gonna give you one more slide. Give me a second. See if I can do this in a hurry. No, that didn't work. And I have no idea how that showed up. So bear with me just a second. Let me exit my screen. Nothing else. Get out of here.
I do kind of like the inception status of like Dean inside of a Dean happening here, though. It's very meta.
Well, it's not meta. Steven's just having a heart attack right now, mainly because I am too. Let me see if I can. Okay, there we go. That's what I want you to see. So this picture is slightly reversed. And remember, I was talking about how you would enter in. Now the entranceway is down at the bottom of the screen. You see that? And so you're coming up from Capitol Avenue. This again is Capitol, and you'll enter in this direction. All those big hotels are now on this side of the screen. And what's really important is you walk up the entranceway, registration occurs as people come in, they hit the bookstore, that's the Foundry Publishing, and they'll come in through here, and all the major educational wing pieces are here. And we are going to be located almost literally as you go up. Our little stand will be right here. And we get half the station where my hand is. I hope everybody can see that, which is right across from the food court area. And that means that we will probably get a lot of traffic through here. The day of Sunday, which is the big day when they have the major event that has all the kids and family experience, that will actually happen directly across from this area. So it will happen in this convention hall area right there. So when people register, one of the little games that they will be playing is called Where is Phineas? Erin, that doesn't mean a thing to you, but our founder was Phineas Brzee. And so instead of Where's Waldo, there's a Where Phineas. They will be going through, after registration, there's a lot of display booths here, but they'll then sojourn up and come into this main area, and we will be one of the locations. So you will have people coming by, and you could say, oh, by the way, and they will be families, obviously trying to collect these tokens. Would you be interested in taking the survey? So we will have a lot of regular traffic throughout that period of time. I will go ahead and, if I can do this without getting myself in trouble again, and see if I can just bring up one more slot, one more document. So again, they'll be coming in this way. We're basically going to be located in this area right here. There'll be food here, and then the children's experiences in Hall C. This will all be opened up for display areas also. For those of you who are coming in during the day, there's parking right across the street at the Pan Am Garage or the Plaza Park or Union Station. So there's plenty of places to park. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. And I'm just going to point out very briefly, we're going to be using certain resources. So the main thing to keep things separated we will have these kind of break apart carrying so that we can keep surveys, clipboards, Erin, the surveys that don't work, those can be sort of saved. As you are finishing those and you get them stapled, you'll be able to put them into a one single box. There won't be folders in it, but you can just lay them down inside, and this one actually does lock so that we have the capacity to lock that one. And if you absolutely need it, the other thing we'll have is carts to carry this material around, and they would be behind the table. So if you had to need to put something out of sight, the cart itself opens up and you can just drop things inside. So I just wanted to let everyone know there's going to be plenty of ways of storing the materials, keeping things separate, making sure that the kids' surveys and the adults are kept separate until they're done, and then immediately staple clip them and then put them away somewhere. So I'll stop the share. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that type of material. Stephanie's
That's great.
trying to go. Erin, any questions you have or any comments just in
So,
light of what I've shown?
As you were talking, I made two other notes. If somebody wants a copy of the survey, please do not give them a copy of the survey, but do make sure they have a QR code or the QR code with the informed consent. They can email us to ask for a copy.
Okay.
We just don't really want the survey floating around. Sometimes parents might ask to see the survey that their kids are going to do before they do it, and that's okay as long as they don't walk away with it. So if a parent says, I might be fine with you talking to my child, but I'd really like to see the questions first. That's their prerogative before they give their consent for their child. You can say, sure, I'd be happy to let you preview the questions here. And then they can kind of flip through it and then make that choice. That's fine, but then don't let them walk away with the clipboard. So no copies of the survey floating around. Again, I don't know kind of the cultural norms of this assembly, if kids roam free from their parents or if they're always together. But if you have a parent approach and they say, oh, well, my kids are here, they're just not with me, could I send them later to finish it or to do their part or whatever the case is? I would tell them that we need everybody together at the point of completion. And so I would say, well, maybe will you be able to come back in the next, however many days are left with your child in order to complete this? Because we're going to be here for this amount of time, but we really have to collect the data together. And so if you don't think that's going to happen, you're welcome to complete this survey by yourself, but we won't be able to take your child's survey without you. And just in terms of kind of the combining surveys after the fact, it doesn't make sense to have them complete it. And then even if they show back up with their kids, because we won't be able to connect those surveys. So again, if they put up a fuss, you're welcome to kind of give them the surveys as long as there's the appropriate consent, and then just make a comment like parents is floating around here somewhere or something like that. And we probably won't use that data.
Yeah.
But I would just encourage them to come back as a unit, that whoever is eligible and might want to do it, they should do it at the same point in front of the booth.
Yeah, I would go ahead. Probably the two types of things you might hear. This is to the team. One would be, I'm headed into a workshop. Can I take the survey with me, do it during the workshop, and bring it back? And I would say no. So we really would like you just to take the 10 minutes. Why don't you come back after the workshop? There may be on occasion, definitely on Saturday or Sunday, when the children's pastor is walking with the child and the parents are maybe in a workshop or something like that. If the children's pastor says, well, can I be here while the child takes it? No. Just, if you don't mind, we'd love for you to have a copy of the book, but if you can bring the parents back and then do it. And if a children's pastor is there with the family and the family wants a book and the children's pastor wants a book, again, not something to fight over. They're not that big a deal. We can donate the book to the children's pastor at the same time. Or we can suggest to them that the Foundry has multiple copies and the curriculum,
Yeah.
And our publishing house will love us for that before it's over. But that's just another way to gently refer out if need be.
Well, and the children's pastor is also welcome to participate as an adult, even if they are a single individual without an attached child. They are welcome to participate and receive the book the good old fashioned way for this research project.
Anybody else? Stephanie, I know you just joined us, and we are recording this, so you can get a chance to review it after, just so you know that. And I'll make sure you get a copy. So
One last just kind of word, if somebody pushes on anything, again, I don't expect that it's not like you're recruiting in like the part of the world where people are unkind, right? Like in a place in society, like these are kind people who are there because we all love Jesus. And so I don't expect anything crazy, but if somebody pushes on kind of why can't I just have a copy of the survey? Just say, that's a question for the researchers. So either you bump it back onto Dean, myself, or Ross, or you bump it onto the IRB. And you say, we have a certain ethics approval to do it in a certain way. And I'm just, that's the way I have to do it. I hope you understand, or something like that. Again, I don't anticipate that being an issue, but you are doing what we've asked. And so you can kind of shift the explanation for any why onto Dean, myself, or the ethics board, because all of those are accurate answers, right? We are the why of how it's happening the way it is.
And I'll be upfront. If asked to be on site, I'll just say that just to preserve the integrity of the survey while we're giving it here at the General Assembly, we're just not allowing the questions to be distributed. But if they're really interested, we can provide something after the fact, and they can
absolutely.
And I'll have business cards if need be. They could email me, but there'll be ample ways to email the other members of the committee also.
Sort of related, quick question. Say this goes really well and we do 400 surveys. Are we going to make more copies, or is that our limit? Or
we're right now we're doing up to. I'll probably bring about 425 just in case we have those surveys that get messed up, something happens, they get torn up. But if need be, and we are on Sunday, and we have people who want to take the survey, even if they can't get the book right away, hear that language, we might be able to work in such a way I could run out and make more copies. But I think we're promoting everything. Erin, you can correct me. The way we've promoted it, and we've secured it through the IRB, is that we have up to 400. So we may just, once we reach the 400, we can also just say we've met the standard with the IRB, and therefore that's where we'll end.
Yeah.
Erin, your thoughts on that?
So we can collect as many surveys as possible, both in terms of people's interests and in terms of photocopies that we have. But after you've given away 400 books, just say, I'm sorry, we have, like, as people, if they're reading the informed consent, I would intentionally draw out the fact that we've already given away the 400 books. We'd still love for you to participate, but I don't have a book to give you, right? I have a smile and my gratitude. That's what I have for you. And some people are still going to do it for a smile and gratitude. But you would want to be upfront about that.
That could also answer the question of giving out the surveys. We have a limited number of surveys that we're trying to collect. We can't give because we're trying to get 400 and we only have 400 printed. So we wouldn't be able to give them away. As another reason why we can't let them walk away with the survey, I would assume, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'll be the first to say that if on Friday and Saturday, if we burn through 250 of the surveys, and we have this full day on Sunday, that's supposed to be a massive event, I might go out and have more surveys made. We just would run out of books, and that would just be part of the constraint. But the way Sunday's going to work is families are going to wander in and have a meal and have a prayer experience. And those are going to be set up in pods, tables of 4. And we are going to have our own separate set of tables. So we'll have our own area where people can come and just sit down and take the survey. And if it takes off, then we'll find a photocopier somewhere to make some additional copies. But I would just want to be cautious not to overpromise anything.
We have approval to collect up to like 3,000. So basically, if every single person there wanted to, but whether or not we want to make 3,000 photocopies is an entirely different kind of question. So that's a dean question.
Yeah, particularly on a Sunday at a professional printer in the area, that's always a limitation too. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
All right. Any other concerns?
I will just say I'm really grateful for all of you. I know I started with that, but it's true. It's partly because we're at the end of an hour of me talking about these minute details and you're still smiling. That's a really good sign. It's encouraging to me. And really, this project wouldn't happen if it wasn't for you all making it happen. So I'm really grateful for you. Thank you for your participation.
The same, and I'll probably just to the team, I may have one more kind of on the ground meeting with you before another Zoom meeting, but then so that everybody knows when we hit the ground, we know what the logistics look like. So I didn't want to overwhelm this meeting with that kind of information today. And if need be, Erin, I think it's okay. I can make this available to the team for review.
Yeah.
I promise not to do any breakouts for TikTok or anything like that anytime soon. So,
well, you wouldn't get any followers. It's not a good strategy. But if as you guys continue and you kind of move closer and if a thought or a question comes to mind, I don't know if you're an anxious person. I like wake up in the middle of the night with these like ideas of like all the things that could go wrong. If that happens to you, just send an email. We'll answer the question. It's not going to go wrong, but I can answer the questions that you have if they come up.
Okay. All right. All hearts clear at this point? It's a dangerous thing for me to ask. I know. All right. Well, blessings, everyone. Erin, if you'll stay on for a couple of minutes, we'll talk. And Stephanie, if need be, you and I can follow up. I'll send you a link to the video as soon as it renders, and we can talk by phone. And
that'd be perfect.
Okay. All right. And Danae, Deborah, Stephen, we will see you guys on campus, I'm sure, between now and the time we get going. Christy, I'll see you in Indianapolis, if not sooner. Okay? All right. Take care of each other.
Great meeting you guys.